Woke up early, dawn's out shining. Coffee brewing, thoughts aligning. Business world keeps redefining. Success is more than just headlining. Ray's got wisdom, Jim's got vision.
Yes, folks, I'm Fred McMurray, and we're back with another episode of Pillars Principles with Ray Pillar and Jim Treleaven. Today we have a special guest, Dr. Maria Malayter, PhD and smart person, somebody that Ray knows. So we're going to let Ray do the intro. Go ahead, Ray. Why don't you tell us about Dr. Malayter?
I would love to, because Dr. Malayter and I have been friends for a very, very long time. Not that she's old or anything like that, but we've known each other for a long time. And I think, well, first of all, Dr. Malayter has been on our show, Pillars Franchising.
Correct.
And that was quite a few years ago, though, and we recently hooked up again and started talking about being on Pillars Principles. So welcome to the show, Dr. Maria Malayter, and can you give us a little idea about what your background is in your doctorate?
So my background is in leadership and organizational change. So a lot of the work that I'm doing is helping people lead and adapt to change and embrace change. Now, that's one aspect of it. And then I've been a business psychologist. So I've been in the realms of industrial and organizational psychology. And what the heck does that mean? It could mean industry, and it could be all the data that goes around with organizations with hiring and different ways that you analyze the data in an organization, or the organizational part, which I lean a little bit more, and that's the people part. And so it's just what's happening in the organizational culture, what's happening with leadership, and I'm really focused on how people lead, and how they manage their leadership roles so they can inspire people and get the work done.
I think the first question that comes to my mind, with all you brainiacs sitting here on this podcast, is what is the psychological profile or makeup of a person wanting to get in business? Oh, wow.
How much time do we have?
Well, right, because I mean, Jim, you probably know this, isn't there, are you specifically talking, entrepreneurship? There's like an entrepreneurship profile you can look at.
Yes, yes,
and that kind of helps people. That's what, people want to get to know, where they're going to line up well as an entrepreneur or not, and so some of that is some of the self-direction and the motivation, because it's a hard ride to start a business.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
That was one of the topics of one of yesterday's lectures, was entrepreneurship and the leadership requirements to actually do that. And you're absolutely right. It's more challenging than people think, and self-motivation and not being risk averse are maybe the two most important.
Oh yeah, you just named them right off the top. And how can we help a person thinking about starting a business or getting into a franchise?
Hold it. Wait, time out. Before you go there.
Okay.
There's a dichotomy in that question. There's a fork in that question of, there's a difference between a entrepreneur who's going to go out and do something stupid and start up a brand new type of business, than a person that's going to go into the phrase that comes to mind, the Ray phrase, a proven business model of a franchise. So the first question you need to ask is, what's the model of the person that wants a proven business model, i.e. a franchise, versus the entrepreneur who says, I'm going to go off and do this and be stupid.
Well, I was going to start off with a more macro version of this. In other words, what is the mindset? What is the and how can we help? The two items that Jim mentioned. How can we help the individual who's beginning to go down that path of wanting to start a business, whether it's a franchise or a business on their own? And of course, they are widely diverse in the fact that. Just simply of the success of one over the other. So how do we help that person overcome some of the things that the two very things that Jim had mentioned?
So I'm immediately thinking of some of the free resources that are available to brand new business owners. Through the small business development centers that are usually attached to community colleges. And so also there are SCORE mentors. So those are two larger kind of organizations that help people walk through conversations about should I even start a business, or whether it's a business on their own or a franchise. And they have specific models, and there are a lot of entrepreneurship programs across the country that are sponsored by different organizations like Bank of America or the Kauffman Foundation, where they can help people go through classes. Not that I've been through any of those. No, I have. I'm in the Cornell one right now, just because I think I wanted to see what their slant was on women's entrepreneurship. So Jim, what do you think?
And the fact that you brought up resources, I think, is important. And there are incubators as well that are very great resources. One of the largest in the world is here in Chicago, 1871 at the Merchandise Mart, where they'll take in entrepreneurs at the idea stage and help them get through that process. Which is, it makes the resources that you mentioned as well, Maria, are very helpful. And entrepreneurs should take advantage of those.
Okay.
And
go ahead, Ray.
Well, and then I that's exactly what I wanted to hear, because I think people who are listening to this show are the type of individual who says, do I have what it takes? And if not, how can we guide them to find out if they have what it takes? And obviously these free resources that are available can at least guide them in the right direction.
Okay. So if there's one characteristic of we'll say the long-term business owner, small business owner, what would you say the most important characteristic is?
Who are you asking?
I'm asking Maria, because I say, say she guess I'm going to ask her.
Okay.
Well, I think I'll say learning agility, being able to pivot really quickly, because as society changes, you're going to have to pivot and change and have that agility to be able to say, okay, this isn't working this way. How can I change it up really quick and be able to go and move quickly? So that's what I think is one of the bigger qualities, because if someone is just not willing to kind of continue to learn or know how to change quickly, that's not going to work for them.
Because change will inevitably befall you in that role.
Absolutely.
I think there's probably a couple answers, but that one I think is the most important. I like it.
Okay.
Yeah. Which is linked with tenacity.
Yeah.
Yes.
There we go. Stubbornness.
Yeah.
That's the negative side of tenacity.
Yeah, Fred always has a pejorative term for anything, but
I'm still alive because I'm stubborn.
Yes.
Gotta be stubborn. Too stubborn to quit is long-term what I always see. Okay, so we've dealt with that part. Let's go into, you got the business launch. You're starting to hire people. What should be how do you determine the psychological profile of the person you want to hire? What guide rails or parameters would you tell somebody that says, I'm finally going to go out and start hiring people, and I need to make sure they fit into the Ray word of culture?
So when I think about that, I think the first thing is I have to look at my own strengths and figure out, what do I need a complementary person to help me with that. And then I think the whole profile of being an entrepreneur in a startup in the first place is also something that I want to ask the right kind of questions. So, even if I were to say, behavioral kind of questions and asking, if our sales are dropping by 20%, how would you approach that? Just thinking about that and thinking about the whole profile of being an entrepreneur in the first place, because someone who's not used to a lot of change isn't going to do very well. So I think for myself, just putting together what's the profile of the values that I have for my organization and also the entrepreneurial skills together to figure out if they're going to fit.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Maria. Sort of the same skills that we just talked about for the entrepreneur themselves would apply to the people that you hire. And then there's the old saying, it's kind of true, which is always hire people smarter than you.
Yes. Yeah. Well, one of the things I think I would look at is knowing my own abilities. What am I lacking? And if I could find that in someone else, to fill that gap.
And you mentioned complementary skills. So I think that's a really good point.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, Ray. I mentioned the C word. Go ahead and riff on that.
Well, that's of course very important, and it's not something that you can define very easily. And it's almost more, and maybe Maria can elaborate on that. It's more like a feeling. And in other words, when you're talking to somebody across the desk, are you guys hitting it off, so to speak? And I don't know how to describe that. Obviously, if it's not working, then it's not working. But Maria, can you kind of elaborate on the culture aspect? How do you define if the person is a fit for your culture?
So I think that definitely goes back to, I see culture as how you get the business done and then the various kind of artifacts around that, like how you communicate with each other. That's an aspect of culture. And so figuring out, the whole piece, I go back to the mission and purpose of the organization and the values to see if they're in alignment. For myself, I'm definitely an upbeat kind of person. So I definitely have to have a little more people like that to fit in my kind of culture. So it's just figuring out if they're going to fit on the same value set. And I think even if organizations even back it up and think about, what are your ethical codes in the organizational too, or in the organization too. I recently heard a presentation by a moving company, and I was so moved by their presentation because he talked about his whole list of ethics, his whole list of ethics for his company, and then how his personal goal as the owner was just talking about how he builds up people and how he has a learning organization. Now, I'm not always thinking of moving companies as a learning organization, but he sure does. And so that's a culture part.
Absolutely. And I when I asked you that question, I was saying your culture, assuming that your culture is a good culture.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Right. Because you could also have a bad culture and you could also attract bad culture people. And I'm going to give a shout out to Ray because I did a little promo on social media about his company because I went and visited his office recently and I was over there and just the way it's set up. And so one of the culture things that I could tell right away in his organization is that people are not numbers there. They are individuals and they're seen. And it was very evident through his organization. Now, not everybody would do that in their business, but Ray had ways to recognize people, and that was part of the culture. So an upbeat culture. So congratulations, Ray. You got a star for a phenomenal culture. Obviously, it's working.
It's working, definitely.
Ray's culture where he's not all around a lot. Sorry, just give folks. I love Ray. Go ahead, Jim. You want to riff on the culture word?
I think Maria's right. It varies in different companies quite a bit sometimes. And so the culture story I often refer to is the one public company, or one company I ran, which was public, and the culture there was very dysfunctional. They were 2 months from bankruptcy. They just viewed the customer as a pain in the ass to be ignored or pissed off in the worst case. And so, we had to do a significant reduction in force, which I thought in a culture like that, which was very sort of inward looking, and that it was going to blow the place up. We had to do the reduction in force to get to at least cash flow break even so that we could survive. And so I was worried about the culture, and it's another whole, and Marie can probably talk about this, but change management principles for the organization. What worked better than I even in my wildest dreams imagined was, I'd been there for 2 seconds. I didn't know anything. I didn't know where the men's room was, so I didn't know, we're going to get rid of all these people, and I'm the asshole from Chicago. So
I thought I was the asshole from Chicago.
What's that?
I thought I was the asshole from Chicago. Never mind.
The other asshole. Anyway, but putting together a team with people from all parts of the organization, including, frontline people, someone that mans the help desk, an engineer, a salesperson, in the room, and saying, here's the goal: is we're going to fix this company. We're going to, the vision is we're going to move from worst to first in terms of, public ratings for customer satisfaction. And we're going to do it with only a little over half the people. And you know what? The people were really good. They just needed a little bit of freedom to be pointed in the right direction, empowered them to do what they needed to do. And wow, it just took care of itself. I mean, the culture was inherent. It just had not been released, as it were. The people were good, little bit of direction, not a lot, actually, a little bit of direction, and the culture changed dramatically in a relatively short period of time. It was fascinating to watch.
All right. So go ahead, Ray.
I can imagine that would be fascinating. Yeah. The only problem I could see with that is if you have one person that one bad apple that could permeate the rest of the culture, that's the person you need to get rid of first, though.
Yeah, that's true. Well, I mean, the board had gotten rid of sort of major bad apples before I came in, but and in putting together the team, I relied on the woman who ran human resources to, because I didn't know anybody, to sort of avoid that. And you're right, though, that can poison the well for sure. But we managed to we probably managed to reduce most of the bad apples in the reduction in force. So
all right. Before we hit the next question or the next topic on this that you've already alluded to, I need to understand is, am I a bad apple because I have a toy crossbow and I shoot people with it? Never mind. God, I love Five Below, and that, never mind. Grandkids, Five Below, you understand it if you're listening, what that means. So we talked about Jim took us down the road of staff reduction. So to Maria, what are best practices? How do you know when to release somebody, and what's the best way to go about it besides shooting them with a real crossbow?
Thanks for a great question. I mean, I think it goes back to where, again, if you're coming in and you're a new person, just figuring out, are they kind of fitting with the culture that you're trying to create or the goals that you're working within? I mean, I think the first step is just to try and listen I mean, whenever you're going to make a change, you do want to listen to the dissenting voices and ask and find
Mhm.
out, because they will give you a lot of data.
You bet.
And then, I mean, yeah, they will give you a lot of data. And so after you kind of weed through that, then you have to kind of consider, are they just a complainer, or are they basically giving some great points to improve the organization? And then from there, seeing like, here's the vision. Are you going to be able to align with that? Is kind of the next question to kind of decipher about that person. Are they going to, follow with your line of vision? And if not, then you need to start having those conversations about, uh, where do you see yourself in this organization? How do you see you contribute? And, and maybe even directly asking is, I notice this kind of bad attitude. Can you tell me a little bit more about what's going on, or how you can turn that around so we can still achieve our goals? Then start going down the road to evaluate. I mean, also you have to ask, are they still doing their job well or not? I mean,
Right.
that's I mean, that's the other part of it, not just attitude about values, but also, are they still doing their job well? Because it could be they inherently are a complainer, but they still do their
Mm.
job well, and that's something to distinguish too.
Okay.
Yeah, one of the other ways to distinguish what I would call a negative Nelly is that person is constantly complaining and not giving you any ideas on how to overcome some of those complaints.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But I always come up with ideas on how to overcome my complaints. Boy, you're mean. Okay, so I want to reiterate here because you said a lot. So what I heard was, you need to ascertain what their vision is of themselves within the company. But primarily, I'm thinking that the first step was kind of the second or third thing, which was, are they getting the work done? Are they doing what needs to be done for the organization? That's kind of, if I'm hearing it, that question is the precursor question that takes you down this path. If the answer is no, then the question becomes, how do you get them to do that, or determine when am I in the ballpark there?
Yeah, because I mean, if they're doing the job well, there could be some outside things going on that could be influencing their attitude. So, and then you just have to weigh out. I mean, if they're doing the job well and complaining, you don't know what's going on, and if it's not,
That's right.
that's the other piece of it too.
And
Yeah.
That could be
And,
disrupting their work.
yeah, the other thing is, are they cancerous from the standpoint of are they spreading negativism throughout the entire organization? And that would be another reason to get, even if they are doing decent work, I would say this person needs to go if they're constantly complaining and to other other equals in their organization.
a lot of it
Mhm.
depends on the job too. So if someone is, a help desk person and interacts with customers all the time, that's a big issue. If someone is a software developer that's working on part of the system that doesn't require a lot of communications with their colleagues, you can sort of lock them away and let them go at it, and it's not that big of a deal.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
That's a great
yeah,
point.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you just stay in your corner and do your job. Don't worry about anything else.
all right.
Corner with a door so you can shut the door.
Like I said, dump the tech people in the basement, lock the door, and I've been there in that basement before. All right, Ray, we're starting to run out of time, so I'm going to give you the last question.
Oh, wow. I wasn't giving that too much thought, but I guess. Wow.
All right, Jim, quick, jump in.
Jim, go. Yeah, I'm gonna hand this over to Jim. Jim,
It's your
you
last
do the last question.
Would be Maria. Do you see? We started the discussion talking about entrepreneurs, and there are similarities between entrepreneurial organizations and much bigger ones. but do you see leadership differences between those two?
I'm only smiling because I think I just had a conversation like this.
Okay.
And so so what I found is I've actually seen a lot more positive attitudes with the leaders of the entrepreneurial organizations.
Mm.
Like I think there's a different mindset there, just a very future forward success mindset. And it's not that I don't see that in corporations, but it maybe it has a different flair to it. It's just a different kind of I don't know if I say mindset. So I think it depends too. That's probably because it's so relationship oriented with the smaller businesses.
Mhm.
And so that has to be a higher level of communication skills. And then with the corporations, it depends on how they have a culture of their leadership. So there are more hierarchical type leaders and others that are more collaborative. And so part of that's coming around because of the changes of where people are working these days. So in how they get things done in teams. But I there's a lot of similar leadership skills, but I definitely, when my experience with more of the small businesses, I've seen a higher level of positivity for some reason. And maybe I'm off on that, but that's kind of,
Oh,
I think that was my shocker.
okay. And if we have time for one more question, I have one more question.
No, we don't have time for one more question. I got one more question, which is, Dr. Malayter, how do people get a hold of you?
Oh, yes. So you can go to my website at docmaria.com, or you could find me on social media on LinkedIn and Instagram and Facebook. And the Facebook page is Doc Maria Inspires.
Excellent.
Like it.
You got a final comment?
Yes, this is a short question, I hope, and that is, there's sort of the stereotypical view of leaders that you see on TV. But there's been a lot written, a lot in Harvard Business Review and other places about quiet leadership, where, sort of the view of the CEO walking in the room and screaming at people and using Fred's bow and arrow or whatever it is, versus someone who is a much, so there's been a lot written on quiet leadership recently. I mean, not recently, the last 10 years probably, but so do you have any views on that?
But keep it short, please.
Okay.
I just think leadership is evolving, and it's because we've had to evolve with the societal changes. So where in the beginning we want a savior for a leader in like the early literature, but now that is not necessarily a fit anymore because everybody has to step up with their leadership. So I think not reading all the articles on quiet leadership, I think there's so much about how the leaders in the whole organization, them individually, play into how they can make the organization work.
I like it. Thanks.
Ray, say goodbye.
Goodbye, everyone.
All right.
Thank you, Maria.
Yeah, thanks
Thank
for
you,
having
Jim.
me. I love
Thanks,
it.
Maria.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Fred.
I'm Fred McMurray with Ray Pillar of Pillar's Principles and Dr. Jim Treleaven and Dr. Maria Malayter. I think I got that too good. We'll be back again with another episode, and who knows, maybe we'll have 2 or 3 doctors next time. We'll be back again next week, folks. Have a great weekend, and remember, go do business with somebody. It's an interesting thing to do.
Woke up early, dawn's out shining. Coffee brewing, thoughts aligning.